Sarah's hands trembled as she slammed the signed divorce papers on the kitchen table, her voice dripping with contempt as she spat the words that would haunt her forever. "I'm done wasting my life on a man who will never amount to anything. Enjoy your pathetic little existence." Daniel, the man sitting across from her, wearing his faded construction worker's jacket covered in dust, simply nodded with quiet eyes that held no anger, only a deep sadness that she was too blinded by ambition to see. And as she grabbed her designer purse bought, on credits she could barely afford, and strutted out of their modest apartment for the last time, she had no idea that the failure she was leaving behind was actually Daniel Chen, the hidden soul heir to the Chen industrial empire, a trillionaire dynasty that owned half the commercial real estate in the country, and that his worn work boots had walked on floors of mansions she could only dream of. But he had chosen this simple life deliberately, searching for something money could never buy. 3 years earlier, Sarah had met Daniel at a community center where he volunteered teaching carpentry to underprivileged kids. And she'd fallen for his kindness, his gentle smile, the way he listened like her words were the most important thing in the world. And for a while, she hadn't cared that he was just a construction worker living in a small apartment, because his love made her feel rich in ways she'd never experienced. But as her friends climbed corporate ladders, posted pictures from exotic vacations, and showed off engagement rings that cost more than a car, the whispers started, the pitying looks when she mentioned Daniel's job, her mother's disappointed sighs, her college roommate's comment that she was settling, and slowly, insidiously, the poison of comparison seeped into her heart. Daniel never changed. He still came home with paint on his hands and brought her wildflowers from the corner store, still made her laugh with terrible jokes while cooking their simple dinners, still held her like she was his entire world. But Sarah had changed, and the apartment that once felt cozy now felt cramped, the simple dates now felt cheap, and the man she'd loved now felt like an anchor dragging her down from the life she deserved. She started staying late at her marketing job, networking with executives, dressing more expensively, building credit card debt to maintain an image, and when her firm landed a contract with a major luxury developer, she attended a gala where she saw how the other half lived. Daniel, who'd come in his only suit, looking uncomfortable and out of place, had embarrassed her by not knowing which fork to use, by talking about carpentry with a CEO's wife instead of business opportunities. And that night, something inside her broke beyond repair. The argument started small. Why couldn't he be more ambitious? Why didn't he want more from life? Why was he content with so little? And Daniel would simply say, "I have everything I need. Sarah, I have you." But those words that should have melted her heart only made her angry, because she wanted diamonds, not devotion, wanted a penthouse, not poetry, wanted a man who looked successful on paper, not one who was successful at being human. When her firm promoted her and she met Marcus, a slick investment banker who drove a Tesla and talked about his portfolio, the comparison became unbearable. And even though Marcus was all surface with no depth, all flash with no substance, he represented the life she'd convinced herself she wanted. And one night, after Daniel came home exhausted from a double shift, covered in sawdust, asking about her day with genuine interest, she'd looked at him with eyes that had forgotten how to see treasure and demanded a divorce. Daniel hadn't fought. He'd simply asked, "Are you sure this is what will make you happy?" And when she'd said yes, with cruel certainty, he'd quietly agreed, had signed the papers without a lawyer, without asking for anything, and had watched her mock him one final time before walking out. And if she'd looked back, she would have seen him pull out his phone and dial a number, heard him say in a breaking voice, "Grandfather, I tried to live a normal life. I tried to find someone who'd love me for me, but I failed. Dial, come home now." 4 months later, Sarah's life looked perfect on social media. She was dating Marcus, attending high society events, posting pictures with champagne and forced smiles, but inside, she felt hollow in ways she couldn't explain. And Marcus, for all his money, treated her like an accessory, checked his phone during their conversations, and had never once asked about her dreams the way Daniel used to every single night. Then came the day that shattered her illusion, her firm's biggest pitch ever, a presentation to Chen Industrial Corporation for their new development project, and Sarah had worked weeks on the proposal, seeing it as her ticket to becoming a junior partner. And when she walked into that glass-towered boardroom that touched the sky, she was focused on her presentation cards until her boss whispered in awe, "That's the CEO. Nobody's seen him in years. He's been abroad. They say he's only 32 and inherited everything from his grandfather who just passed." Sarah looked up at the head of the massive table, and the world stopped spinning. There, in a perfectly tailored suit that costs more than her yearly salary, sitting with quiet authority in a chair that commanded respect from every executive in the room, was Daniel Her. Daniel, except he wasn't her anything anymore, and his eyes met hers with a flicker of recognition before going professionally neutral, and she watched in surreal horror as her boss practically bowed, as hardened businessmen hung on his every word, as her colleague whispered, "Daniel Chen, youngest trillionaire in the country. They say he disappeared for 3 years, lived anonymously somewhere. Nobody knows why." The presentation was a disaster. Sarah stumbled through her words, her hands shaking so badly she dropped her cards, her mind screaming with 1,000 questions. And when it ended, Daniel simply said, "We'll consider your proposal. Thank you for your time," in a voice that was polite and distant, and nothing like the warm tone that used to say her name like a prayer. She tried to approach him after, but his assistant, crisp professional woman, who probably earned triple Sarah's salary, blocked her path with a polite smile that was really a wall, and Sarah was escorted out with the others. And she sat in her car in that gleaming parking garage, surrounded by luxury vehicles, and finally understood what she'd done, who she'd thrown away, and the scream that tore from her throat echoed off the concrete like the wail of someone who'd lost everything that mattered. That night, she broke up with Marcus, who shrugged it off, already texting someone else, and she sat in her expensive apartment that felt empty despite all its trendy furniture, and she finally let herself remember Daniel teaching neighborhood kids with infinite patience, Daniel volunteering at soup kitchens every Sunday, Daniel fixing elderly neighbors' broken furniture for free, Daniel reading to children at the hospital. Daniel Hood once told her, "My mom grew up with nothing, and she taught me that character is the only wealth that matters, that money without purpose is just paper," and she dismissed it as something poor people said to feel better. Never understanding he was speaking from a place of wisdom she'd been too shallow to comprehend. The weeks that followed were agony. She learned from news articles that Daniel's mother had been an elementary school teacher who'd married into the Chen family but died when Daniel was young, that his grandfather had wanted to teach him the value of money by having him spend time living as ordinary people did, that Daniel had taken it further, genuinely trying to live a normal life, to find authentic connection, to understand the world beyond wealth, and that he'd fallen in love with a marketing associate named Sarah, whom he'd planned to tell everything once. He was sure she loved him for himself, but she'd left before that day came. Sarah wrote letters she never sent, dialed his number disconnected, showed up at the old apartment where a new family now lived, and finally, in desperation, she went to Chen Industrial Corporation's towering headquarters and asked to see him, only to be turned away day after day, week after week, until one afternoon the receptionist handed her an envelope containing a check for $50,000 and a note in Daniel's handwriting. "You said you wanted more from life. This should help. I hold no anger toward you. I hope you find whatever it is you're looking for. Take care of yourself. Daniel." The check felt like a slap and a kindness all at once, and Sarah tore it into pieces right there in the lobby, and she finally understood that she didn't want his money, had never really wanted money at all, but had been so poisoned by society's definition of success that she'd destroyed the one thing that had ever made her truly rich. Being loved completely by a genuinely good man. 6 months after the divorce, Sarah quit her high-pressure job and started volunteering at the same community center where she'd first met Daniel, teaching marketing skills to young people trying to start small businesses. And the work paid nothing but filled the cavern in her chest with something that felt like purpose. And one Saturday, while helping a teenager design a logo for his lawn care business, she looked up and saw Daniel standing in the doorway, dressed simply in jeans and a sweater, watching her with an expression she couldn't read. "Daniel," she whispered, standing so quickly her chair fell back, and he walked toward her slowly, carefully, like approaching something fragile, and she noticed he looked tired, older somehow, sadder in the eyes, despite all his wealth. And when he spoke, his voice was gentle but guarded. "They told me a new volunteer was making a real difference with the kids. I didn't know it was you." Sarah felt tears streaming down her face as words tumbled out. "I'm so sorry. I'm so incredibly sorry. I was blind and shallow and stupid. I threw away the best thing in my life because I was chasing some illusion of what success looks like. I don't want your money. I never should have wanted money. I just want you to know that I finally understand what you tried to show me, that I've changed, that I'm trying to be the person I should have been when we were together. And I don't expect forgiveness. I don't expect anything. I just needed you to know that you were right about everything, and I was wrong, and I will regret what I did for the rest of my life." Daniel was quiet for a long moment, and she saw pain flicker across his face, the pain of old wounds, and finally he said, "I loved you so much, Sarah. I was going to tell you everything. I had a ring. I was just waiting to be sure you loved the man, not what he could become. And when you left, when you mocked me for being exactly who I'd chosen to be, it broke something in me. Made me wonder if authentic love is even possible, if everyone has a price. I can't take back what I did," Sarah said, her voice cracking. "I can't undo the cruelty, the blindness, the betrayal of everything we had. But I can tell you that I learned the hardest lesson of my life, that I finally grew up, and that if I could go back, I would fall to my knees and thank God every day for a man who valued people over profit, who chose meaning over money, who loved me when I didn't deserve it." And she wiped her eyes, adding, "I'm not here to win you back. I know I destroyed that chance. I'm just here trying to be the person you believed I could be, hoping that counts for something in the universe, even if it doesn't count for you." Daniel looked at her for a long time, and she saw him wrestling with something internal. And then he said something that surprised her. "I've been miserable, Sarah. I went back to my old life, the galas, the boardrooms, the wealth, and it all felt meaningless because I'd tasted something real with you, even if it ended badly, and I've been trying to figure out if I was a fool for believing in simple happiness, or if you were just the wrong person to build it with." "I was the wrong person then," Sarah said honestly. "I wasn't mature enough, wasn't grounded enough, wasn't wise enough to recognize treasure. But Daniel, I'm not asking for another chance. I'm just asking if maybe, possibly, we could start as friends, if you could let me show you through actions, not words, that people can change, that I have changed, and if nothing else ever comes of it, maybe you'll believe again that authentic love is possible, just not with me, with someone better who'll appreciate you from the start." Something softened in Daniel's expression, and he said quietly, "I come here every Saturday to check on the programs. I fund most of them anonymously. Maybe I'll see you around, and maybe over time we'll see who we both are now. No promises, no expectations, just two people trying to do some good in the world." Over the following year, Sarah and Daniel orbited each other in that community center, working side by side on projects, having careful conversations that slowly deepened, rebuilding trust brick by brick, and Sarah never asked him for anything, never mentioned his wealth, treated him exactly as she would have if he were still the construction worker she'd met years ago. And Daniel watched her growth with cautious hope, seeing her patience with struggling kids, her humility when she made mistakes, her genuine joy in simple victories. And one day, while they were painting a mural with a group of children, he reached over and held her hand. And she looked at him with tears in her eyes, and he said, "I'm not ready to go back to what we were. I don't know if I'll ever be, but I think I'm ready to see what we might become." To people who've both learned hard lessons, who both know now that the best things in life aren't things at all. Sarah squeezed his hand and replied, "I don't need what we were. That Sarah didn't deserve you. But maybe, if you're willing, this Sarah can earn your friendship, your trust, and someday, if I'm very lucky and work very hard at becoming someone truly worthy, maybe something more. And if not, Daniel, if you decide I had my chance and I blew it, I'll still be grateful. Every day that you gave me the gift of seeing what really matters." 2 years after the divorce, in the same community center where they'd first met, Daniel and Sarah stood together, announcing a new initiative, the Chen Foundation for Youth Empowerment, which Sarah would direct, helping young people build businesses based on purpose, not just profit. And after the announcement, Daniel turned to the small crowd and said, "I want to thank my partner in this venture, someone who taught me that people can transform, that mistakes don't define us, that growth is always possible, and that sometimes the greatest love stories aren't about perfect people finding each other, but broken people healing together." And he looked at Sarah with eyes full of cautious, hard-won, deeply genuine love, and she looked back at him with gratitude and humility, and a wisdom earned through loss. And while neither knew exactly what their future held, they both knew they were finally building on the right foundation, not wealth, not status, not image, but character, purpose, and the understanding that the richest life is one spent loving well and serving others, and that sometimes you have to lose everything you thought you wanted to find everything you actually needed. Moral: true wealth isn't measured in bank accounts but in the richness of our character and the depth of our connections. Sometimes we must lose what we mistakenly cherished to discover what we should have treasured all along, and the greatest fortune is recognizing genuine love before it's too late, or having the courage to rebuild it if we're given a second chance.